Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 66.
66.
66. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, not a papal drama.
No, we haven't.
What's it called again?
Conclave.
Conclave, yeah. Not Conclave.
No.
Instead, we're going to discuss Joker, Folie, Deux.
Yes.
Really got a finger on the pulse with this one.
Yep. This is hot off the presses, this film.
It's just come from a screening at Leicester Square.
Yeah.
You know, I just sort of felt like it was a film that, after watching it, I really wanted to talk about it.
Okay, yeah.
Partly because of my perhaps well-documented disdain for the original. But also just as a sort of... I think both of these films are quite an interesting reflection of where the industry is at the moment, particularly in the mainstream sense.
Yeah.
So I think, I still think there's scope to talk about it, even if we are quite late.
Yeah, I think it's prescient. People are going to be talking about this in a negative way, I think, for a while. It was broadly seen as a financial failure. It might find a new life on streaming, and it was polarising. Like, it wasn't exception, wasn't negative. So,
the contrast between the release of the first and the second is so stark.
It's mad. Yeah,
you couldn't have like conversations with 2 or 3 different people and the first Joker film not come up. Like anyway. And for someone that really disliked the film, it was quite difficult to, because you don't want to be that guy in certain situations, especially when you're at work.
Oh, I know,
like that. You don't want to be that guy who's like, well, I actually thought,
It happened to me today, actually, and I was that guy.
Oh, really?
It just made me uncomfortable. I was in a car.
That's even worse.
Yeah, it was.
There's no way for the other person to escape.
No, there wasn't, and it was raining really heavily, and like all the, it's just muggy in the car.
Yeah. What was the topic, out of interest?
It's just various films that came out recently, so I slagged off Gladiator 2 probably more than I should. Then I slagged off Joker 2, and then I talked not very highly of Anora either, and I was like, oh no, I've just been really negative this entire car journey.
It's funny, isn't it? I think people assume expertise, or I guess not necessarily expertise, but if you studied something, that you're always going to be cynical about it.
Yeah.
You reaffirmed that.
I did, that stereotype was very much fulfilled. So apologies to David and Anita and George and Chris for that. I think he didn't.
After dropping you off, drove the car into the nearest lake. No, I know what you mean. It is tricky to sort of, I find it, you have to sort of pick your moment, but sometimes it's really hard to pick your moment. You just find yourself talking about it because you're passionate about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And everyone's allowed to talk about things they like and don't like. It's just certain, especially culture, I find, like films and stuff, people really nail themselves to certain things, and I have it quite a lot when I talk to people about superhero films, and they're absolutely just in love with them. And I just think I'm not going to say anything, because there's no way I'm not going to come across like a twat.
Yeah, exactly. No matter how kind of wrong or right that your opinions are, it's sort of, it's not going to go down well, is it?
No.
Yeah, you're not preaching to the right crowd, I suppose. And
that's why we do this. This is why Cinema exists, so we can do it to
thin air. To kind of to a kind of a different platform of expression, I suppose.
As both films are sort of at least purport to have socially conscious credentials, we felt it'd be a good opportunity to weave some of the sort of more popular and perhaps iconic examples of this, particularly films from the New Hollywood era. I think that's especially important, given that the first Joker is a rip-off of that era. And then also we'll talk about the first film, a bit about Todd Phillips, maybe some of his career, and then of course Joker, Folie, Deux afterwards.
Looking forward to it.
Shall we?
Let's.
Questing the cinematic void.
So it's worth pointing out that we are both suffering from moderate respiratory illnesses. So if there's any coughs or if we sound a bit nasal, that is why. Yeah,
we're going to sound even more grating than we already did.
Yeah.
Which is impressive.
I think so, yeah.
So, right, okay, Joker 1.
Joker.
Or just The Joker.
Yeah.
Famously titled.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that the film just came absolutely out of nowhere. It was one of those kinds of movies. It just felt that there wasn't a huge amount of buzz about it. Perhaps even more negativity towards it, given that obviously the last person to play the role of the Joker did such a sort of such a good job in the eyes of the sort of general cinema going.
Talk about Heath Ledger, not Jared Leto. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah, fucking hell, yeah. Of course, I forgot. See, I forgot about that. But it's a character that has a legacy for sort of, with the exception of Jared Leto. Actors really making it their own and it becoming iconic.
Yeah.
Obviously with Jack Nicholson.
Oh God, yeah.
In Tim Burton's Batman films. Even like Mark Hamill.
I was just about to say Mark Hamill,
on the
Arkham
animated series.
He was in the Arkham games as well, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Fantastic, yeah.
And of course Heath Ledger, whose portrayal of the character was, I don't know, given a higher sense of prestige, possibly because he passed away shortly afterwards.
I think it cemented his reputation as a really interesting actor, and quite often those stories are steeped in tragedy. I do really enjoy his performance. I think it was actually aided quite significantly by the screenplay. I think I love the idea that he is nothing and that there is no motivation. That is kind of like that sort of iconic speech by Michael Caine. Some men just want to watch the world burn. It is repeated to me far too often with Instagram reels these days, but there is a real kind of sense of pure, unadulterated, mindless chaos, which I think really suits the Joker quite well in that he doesn't have a past, he doesn't think about his future, he just thinks about disruption. Ledger does portray that really brilliantly.
Yes.
And obviously left a sizable, very heavy mantle to lift, and I think the results after the fact have been, varying. Yeah,
it's interesting to think about the sort of the negativity that would be levelled towards anyone that plays that role because of Heath Ledger, when you consider that Heath Ledger was met with the same amount of negativity when he was announced.
I know, yeah.
It's strange, isn't it?
I thought he was a sort of kind of pin-up poster boy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
A bit of almost in the realm of Pattinson. Maybe not to the same sort of fame level of fame, but he was kind of.
He was a heartthrob, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Knight's Tale, etc. All that kind of stuff.
No, I'd agree with that. As a fellow heartthrob,
of
the podcasting realm. I agree. It is really interesting, and it's a character that I think has a certain sense of prestige about it generally because of those performances. And it seems to me that even people that aren't really into superhero films, see that character with a sense of prestige, even if the sort of genre is sort of dominated and to the point where it's had a huge impact on the sort of output of the industry, and obviously a lot of people are becoming increasingly fatigued with that. The sort of that side of the comic book world seems to have been left untouched by this sort of growing negativity that's leveled towards the genre, and I find that particularly interesting, and I think that is probably more so because of the Nolan Batman films.
Yes, definitely.
Than anything else, which is interesting considering the Nolan Batman films sort of ushered in that sort of gritty tone that Snyder just
ruined
doubled down on. But no, I just think it's interesting to me that still exists, and I sort of thought that whilst I don't necessarily always agree with that this sort of character or this sort of corner of the comic book world shouldn't be met with the same sort of cynicism, that seemed to be the case with the first Joker.
Yeah.
People were like, oh my God, because of the way that the film was framed as a study of the sort of decaying fabric of society, the collapse of values and the pursuit of maintaining the power of the ultra wealthy, and it was a kind of a ground level assessment of the fallout from that. And then through that, creating this idea that Joker was this sort of peripheral figure, this sort of icon of counterculture, which is a different take on the kind of Joker that we'd seen previously.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Not an agent of chaos anymore.
No,
he's got an agenda all of a sudden.
Yeah,
and that changed it up. A lot of people really got on board with that.
Yes,
and it's strange to me because what I thought the appeal of the Joker was, and I thought it was illustrated really well in The Dark Knight, was that he didn't embody anything.
Yeah,
and I liked that about him, and I liked I like the fact that he had 3 different stories about how he came to get these sort of facial disfigurement.
Oh yeah,
you heard one and you thought, I don't really need to hear that. I don't know. I like the fact that you're this sort of enigma, and then he says a different one. You're like, oh right, okay, yeah. Just great. And then, so for me, it was slightly confrontational for the character to all of a sudden
mean something.
Have like an origin story wrapped up in, like you say, a sort of new Hollywood inner city kind of fable. It was a strange way to deploy it, and I mean, a lot of people loved it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Particularly, I find the sort of new Hollywood thing was one of the grating things about it for me, because that was sort of, I think, one of the central things that director Todd Phillips was really sort of pushing, was this idea of, resurrecting the sort of themes and sort of the sense of urgency that came with New Hollywood in the now.
Yes.
Or 2019's now. Was it 2019? I think it was, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Right before.
So, and I think that's to me, that immediately had my eyebrows raised.
Definitely.
Because it's just baffling to me that you could try, because they're just obviously they're 2 different eras, but in terms culturally, what makes no Hollywood, what makes New Hollywood such a sort of definitive era in film history is that it's the sort of birth of this kind of like ground level expression. This way in which filmmakers are challenging this sort of established order through film. And filmmaking wasn't about this sort of, it wasn't this grandiose thing done in sound stages and run by sort of studios that control everything. Everything just sort of exploded, and people were making films on location with shitty cameras and really
leaving the lens flares in.
Exactly, and really getting to the sort of nucleus of these sort of these growing social issues that I think a lot of the kind of dominant culture of the time did its level-headed best to try and obscure. And I think it's interesting that that Phillips tries to channel that energy into a film, and try and channel that spirit, but in a way that also sort of facilitates the film's main goal, which is to make as much money as possible. And that's the contradiction of the film that I found most grating.
And
obviously all films set out to make money. Obviously people, when they go out for funding, the people that fund it obviously want a return on their investment. But, I think, the idea that that you would sort of seek to channel the energy of films, of sort of filmmakers who are like making Taxi Driver, it's a completely different time. Culturally, it's a different time,
and it's not a new property either. It's an existing one which is famed for being very financially successful. Warner Brothers aren't just going to shell out that like $50 million. The first film cost $50 million, I think, or 60.
Which in itself is quite rare. I mean,
it's a weird budget.
I mean, it's a mid-budget film,
really,
it is, and first one. That's we often lament the fact that space in Hollywood is long dead. And it's interesting that they pumped that amount of money in. I think they knew that. It sort of provide this almost sort of illusion that you're getting a mid-budget film experience.
Also the illusion of trying something new. And the illusion of, just because you slap a sort of filter and some film grain on your movie.
And have some sort of blood and some swear words.
And it did suffer from that. And it was, in my eyes, a very, very thinly veiled attempt to hide some pretty gaping like storytelling issues. Like the main one that I always kind of come back to is the twist that the woman in the apartment,
Zazie Beetz' character,
that she doesn't exist.
I think I'm saying her name right.
Figment of his imagination, which not only is just a stupid fucking twist, like not one that I thought was particularly necessary, but also undermines the mental health message. I think, because it's like not everyone who's suffering from mental health problems is seeing like spectres and figures and
objects of desire,
not in that way anyway. Like, obviously everyone has fantasies, but to portray it in a way that it's kind of a result of him suffering from complex mental health issues, I thought was just like kind of not a very subtle approach at all.
No, I 100% agree. And I mean, it's interesting that the film sort of sets itself up about this idea of the sort of relationship between sort of poverty and struggle and mental health. The growth of mental health issues, which is obviously quite, it's well documented, the sort of link between those things. But Phillips plays so fast and loose with that. The idea, he's got mental health problems. What?
Yeah.
He's just got mental health problems.
General.
So basically, what that means is, from a writing point of view, you could just make him have like
visions.
Visions, and then these sort of these bouts of psychosis and all this kind of stuff. You can just sort of cram it all together in a way that feels sort of really. I don't know. Like, I thought it was very misguided and a sort of damaging way to portray mental health issues.
I thought so. Yeah,
and especially as it's sort of against the backdrop of this kind of. Sort of heroism. There's a sort of there's a not backdrop. I mean, sort of the kind of the idea that they make him a hero.
Yes, definitely. By the end, when there's the kind of riot that's been incited, and they kind of martyr. There's a martyr. With him running around in the hospital at the end. Odd. It didn't leave it left a sour taste, I think, for me.
Well, I just think if we go back to that sort of the kind of mainstream intentions of the film, that's where the sort of the contradiction lies for me, because you're sort of positing yourself as a film that's going to channel the energy of new Hollywood, and you're going to make some sort of scathing critique about the collapse of morals in a sort of crumbling urban nightmare.
Yeah.
But what do you do apart from sort of just like you say, slap some film grain on and make sort of vague allusions? You make vague allusions to the sort of the link between mental health issues and poverty and struggle. You make vague allusions to the sort of the growing gulf between the rich and the poor, and how the sort of the power of the rich hold enables them to put policies and things in place that keep the poor people poor. And it almost ends up, the film kind of felt like the ramblings, and this is coming from someone that was this, a sort of 17-year-old boy who discovered weed and Bill Hicks at the same time.
Right, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it just feels like that. Do you know, and it's also very surface level, not particularly coherent or thought out.
No.
Perhaps cathartic.
Big time. I mean,
but not. There's just no real desire to sort of linger than longer than like a couple of minutes on these things, because you need to facilitate another set piece or another opportunity for Joaquin Phoenix to sort of be, the Joker and do like a laugh or whatever. And I don't know. It just felt very
how much weight he's lost.
And then like a dance sequence. It's like, well, what the fuck's this about? It just felt, it bothered me that the film thought it was being so sort of introspective and so powerful. And I think that's what pissed me off more about it, was that to hear Phillips in discussions about it, or to hear people talk about it, it was if like all of these things that were happening in the film, no one had noticed until the film came out. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and I'm just there thinking, what did the film actually say that was meaningful, apart from things that anyone could fucking say or point out. Do you know what I mean? And
around a sort of simple after a few beers or whatever, and discussion.
The film's layout and just narrative is like unbelievably simple and straightforward. I mean, the fact that we talk about the sort of Sazy Beats thing, it's like there was no conviction or bravery in the sense of the sort of writing just to say, do you know what? Let's leave that ambiguous.
That would have been fine.
Because ambiguity, I think, is like a real strength of a lot of like the great new Hollywood movies. Like, there's so much ambiguity in Taxi Driver, like the end of Taxi Driver. Like, I know that's been sort of well talked about by everyone that's been involved with it, but I think there's still scope for ambiguity in that, in the ending.
Big time, yeah.
And that ambiguity is what makes the film quite sort of harrowing and terrifying. Obviously, a pretty terrifying film throughout, really.
Yeah.
And the greatest terror of that film is that you feel like genuine sympathy and compassion for someone that is, self-destructive and ultimately commits an atrocious act of violence.
And I always think about the scene where he goes on the date, talks about the cake and stuff. And and he sort of is being charming enough so she doesn't immediately leave, but also gradually reveals the kind of slightly unhinged nature of his personality, and how she reacts to that is really interesting.
Yeah.
And you and you just think about the Joker equivalent, which is like really throwaway, and then the kind of the senseless act of violence in Joker is like cathartic. I think because they're sort of the 3 or 4 blokes he kills are like meant to be sort of Wall Street bankers, aren't they?
Yuppie, yeah.
So you kind of don't care about them, and that it's sort of, you're sort of meant to enjoy the fact that they're being brutalized, and they are being horrible to him. Like, it doesn't. But then the result of that is like, there's a cathartic thing there, which I thought was a bit of an odd feeling to be had with a film where no one is particularly nice, apart from Zazie Beetz. Turns out not to be real. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too sort of rose tinted about their, because I thought broadly speaking the interactions he has with her were quite nice and quite.
She's real in the sense that she's about, but obviously their relationship. As it becomes more meaningful, that's obviously complete artifice, right?
That's it. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting you point out the yuppie thing and the whole idea about catharsis. It's almost like a power fantasy.
But
it's a power fantasy born from like surface level understanding,
hatred.
Which I think a lot of people sort of criticise the film for almost being a rallying cry for the kind of people that have a go at women on the internet. And you can see that because of the manner in which it frames Fleck's mental health issues in a vague and just misguided manner, the way it sort of frames the sort of the sort of whole societal critique, and again those punchy moments of catharsis. You don't really feel catharsis in Taxi Driver when you kill someone.
Not really, no.
No, you don't think, oh bloody hell, good. Whereas I think in the Joker, that's kind of the point. You're supposed to think, oh yeah, take that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're rich and successful. You deserve to be sort of stomped to the ground.
And this is coming from someone that's, we try and avoid sort of our own political views on cinema, but I'm on paper more ideologically aligned to be critical of those systems. And how the world works, but I'm certainly not siding with this attempt. I just think, it's just, and it really took me aback how so many people were completely on board with it.
And like actively encouraged. The film benefited from really strong word of mouth. It made $1 billion, the first film, which is a lot of money.
Won an Oscar. Won the Golden Lion for best film.
Yeah, did it? Oh yeah, it did. It was a
Venice.
Berlin thing, or Venice. Sorry.
Oh no, Golden Lion's.
I think the Golden Bear is Berlin and Golden Lion is Venice. Sorry.
Did it win the Palme d'Or?
I don't think it won the Palme d'Or.
I think it might.
It might have won something at Cannes, maybe. If it because an American film hasn't won the Palme d'Or for a really long time. That's why Anora.
Was a big thing.
Anora was a big thing.
It must be. Yeah. I remember thinking when it won that award, I thought, "Fucking hell, that's crazy."
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think it was definitely a Berlin thing. It did very well. The controversy about the Gary Glitter song only fueled people's desire to see it. I think.
I
think it's one of those paradoxical marketing moves where, a studio will purport to be outraged by the actions of the filmmakers and say we don't condone the actions of Gary Glitter, obviously, but all that does is drum up publicity and make people more curious. And it's just a total, it's pretty transparent if you think about it, really. That's not to say that it wasn't a mistake using a Gary Glitter song. It was a bit of an odd choice, but there we go. And it's just a really strange artifact. And when I watched it, I remember watching it at home, because I didn't see it at the cinema. Actually,
I saw it at the cinema.
Did you? Yeah. I just missed it. I think. We didn't do the podcast, so there wasn't nearly as much cause for me to go to the cinema. And it was a time in my life, actually, that kind of my cinema outings lapsed massively. So I just didn't see it. And I watched it at home and just remember thinking that it was like... I think if it hadn't been received the way it did, I would have just ignored it. I would have just been like, oh, that was all right. Weird that Todd Phillips of The Hangover did that. And moved on. But it was so successful. Obviously, it garnered a sort of a real following. And has got a sequel, and I still to this day am a bit baffled. And people I really admire really got on with the film as well.
Yeah.
So it did make me wonder whether I'd misread it, and maybe it was more clever than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Over time, I sort of realised, actually, no, it was, there was.
Well, I mean, I guess your mileage will vary as it. That's such a fucking stupid thing to say because that's the same with any film, but I think it will vary depending on how much digging you're prepared to do. Yeah. If you broadly agree with this idea that that sort of society's apathetic viewpoint on mental health issues and poverty, then you would subscribe to the films.
Yeah.
Certainly, perhaps not the cathartic moments of violence, but the film's sort of thematic underbelly.
The message,
you would. I mean, and I think, that's not necessarily. I wouldn't think less of anyone that did that. I just personally feel like there's a problem with a film that purports to be this sort of cinematic renegade, and yet is clearly built for sort of mass appeal, mass entertainment.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the reason why this film did so well is because we've been so starved of these kinds of films. That's that any film that comes out that even fucking dips its toes in this sort of subject matter is seen as like the authority on these subject matters, And I think that's one of the big reasons, particularly as given that it does have obviously the connection to a sort of superhero extended universe. Obviously it's its own film, but I think people see it as this kind of idea that superhero films are growing up. And I think that's something that a lot of people band around, is that they want these sort of more adult, mature experiences, which I'm sure comic book films could do. But it's always going to be seen to me, and maybe to you as well, as this sort of like shallow attempt to sort of garner a sort of a critical oomph that they perhaps don't have. And that might be a bit overly cynical, and I'd hate to be just sort of disregard any film before I've seen it, but I don't know, it just sort of feels like it's the same people who think that the most recent Deadpool, I mean, I haven't seen it, but apparently it sort of prides itself in having 170 fuck yous in it or something.
Oh, right, okay.
F-bombs, and because the MCU's only had one.
Right.
And the idea of violence and language, I think we talk about this quite a lot, but it's seen as it's that sort of superficial stuff that is seen as mature and adult. And I always think actually that there's more. I know this sort of whole shtick of Deadpool's it's supposed to be childish and irreverent, but I just feel like that approach to storytelling, to me, it looks more childish, and I think there's more. It has more glaring errors in it because
I've not seen
that's like sort of like a surface level thing, and I've really felt that with the Joker as well.
Yeah. I think if we're comparing it back to sort of Nolan's Batman trilogy, I think the real key difference is Nolan. By the time The Dark Knight came out, everyone, he was up there. He was already, his reputation was starting to become that of like a really sort of highbrow filmmaker.
Yeah.
And yet he knew that they were popular entertainment, and he was not afraid to kind of use storytelling tropes which are tried and tested in order to make them entertaining, whereas at the same time, like, wearing the influences, obviously heat is like a huge influence on The Dark Knight, and he
post 9/11 sort of themes and ideas. I mean,
and but whereas I think he was very open about his use of like pastiche and stuff in that film, and
like moments like, do you remember the scene? I watched it recently, and there's like a scene where like the Joker's chasing Harvey Dent in the SWAT van, and there's a guy in the suite going, "I didn't sign up for this." And he just says lines like that, and in every one of his films, or certainly his Batman films, there has to be characters like that.
And
I just think you're not servicing the story in any way. And that's what you mean about like. I think that's what you mean anyway. Sort of Nolan's, he's unabashed in sort of playing to those things,
and he doesn't sort of shy away from accepting that. Oh, I know these films are for huge amounts of people.
Yeah.
And I actually think, weirdly, the least interesting character in The Dark Knight is Batman. For that reason, because he's just like a normal Hollywood character in it, and his morals are sort of absolute, and he doesn't really have an arc, and he learns stuff about other people, and I kind of think that's interesting. But with the Joker, it's all kind of it all feels a bit like playing the cards too close to your chest sort of thing, and not being open about like what the influences are. And if you do reference the influences, like I know Taxi Driver was bannered around a lot in the
and King of Comedy,
King of Comedy being a huge one.
Yeah.
Like you need to maybe some acknowledgement that plot details were lifted verbatim from those films, and it was like the idea was, I know this is like a new and fresh thing for superhero films. It's like, well, is it really? Like, I think it's been done, and it's been done really well, and also arguably with The Dark Knight Rises it was done not so well, and there's already like a few of these out, and there's kind of adult themes in the Spider-Man films as well, and even to a lesser extent the early Marvel films have that kind of stamp on it. And it just thought it was a lot more different than actually I think it was in terms of
and there was such a bullishness about that, I thought, and that's what made me more annoyed. I'd be happy to, I'd be happy, but I'd be like happier thinking I didn't like it, but maybe it was trying it, but Phillips was so bullish about it, and I thought, fuck you, man, you're full of shit, I mean, whatever, I mean, fuck it, but like,
I think he was trying to distance himself from his own career as well, because he's made some, he's a comedy director, and
he's made some pretty sort of nihilistic comedies, isn't
yeah, like The Hangover I think is really nihilistic.
I mean, like fucking 15, 16-year-old me probably loved The Hangover.
I remember going to see it at the cinema and thinking it was hilarious. Like there was some quotable moments in it. But he was trying to shed that skin. I think he was trying to do a Daniel Radcliffe after Harry Potter. He's like, no, I could do this as well. Ooh, like, I'm a real director.
It feels like that. It has that edge to it, doesn't it?
I wonder what he's going to do next. I really do. It's not going to be a comedy. I know that he's established a reputation for himself, for better or worse, as being someone who's gritty and urban. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. The King of Comedy thing was always interesting to me, because I guess that's one of the other themes of the movie, is the sort of the media is sort of like another sort of exploitative arm of the elite. And then it sort of it ties into this sort of the tragic element of Fleck's character, that he's this aspiring comic who has no talent. So he has all the will in the world. He's sort of like Ed Wood. Do you know what I mean? Like someone that has all this fucking passion for one thing, and despite their best effort and intentions, it just can't do it. They're just not good at it. And it ties into that, and I guess the sort of the manner in which that he's sort of chewed up and spat out by that. Again, done 1,000 times better in
King of
Comedy.
Big time.
And it's, if you want any more of a sort of clear indication of this film is just mugging it off, you fucking stick De Niro as the fucking TV show host.
Oh, yeah. And even the same, like, even the suits are quite similar, aren't
they?
Like the velvet suit, King of Comedy is really interesting. I like it, because the way it frames the central character, is it Rupert Bumpkin or something?
Pumpkin, Pumpkin, I think it is, isn't it?
It is, like you say, it frames him immediately as being obsessed with media and obsessed with this particular television show. It actually reminded me of Requiem for a Dream.
A little
bit with Ellen Burstyn's character's obsession with this game show. And you do get, especially in that era, I imagine you got a lot of people like hugely obsessed with like, kind of
one particular show.
And it's like they can't miss it. No matter what like circumstances, that like, they have to see it and they have to put it on, even if they're in hospital, kind of thing. And it frames him in that way as being a kind of a loner with an obsession, but it doesn't have him dancing around and kind of like having these moments to himself where he sort of takes his top off and reveals his sort of skinny frame, and like it's just like he is just kind of like a lost soul and unfortunate.
There's so many wonderful moments, isn't there? Like the bit where he's like he has like his room all set up. And I just think, and his mum's shouting at him. And stuff. I mean, that's a trope that's probably overdone now, but back then it was just so like her voice was like, I thought it was brilliant that she was never revealed. It was just her voice is enough to break this sort of like illusion that he's so desperate. It's so representative of his his desperation to be famous, and his
sort of the way he conducts himself is so like he refuses to break, doesn't he? He's always got a front on of being composed, but it's a kind of almost an adaptation of composure. It's not real composure at all,
yeah.
and there's like nuances from De Niro's performance that really let his real side through, but not in the sense of him kind of moaning and wailing and.
Yeah, he's not nasty, is he?
He's just a lost soul, and his actions are abhorrent, but they're coming from a weirdly good place, and a selfish but good place, I think, and he just wants the best for himself, and I always that's what I remember of the King of Comedy anyway.
Yeah, and again, another ending that's quite, there's potential there to view the film with ambiguity, because he goes and does this comedy show, and then it just becomes this sort of montage of all of this sort of success, and you're not quite sure.
Yeah, because his skit isn't unfunny, but it's just plain, isn't it? It's just like a really normal stand-up routine.
Yeah, like he's obviously he's just a product of his influences to the point where there's no originality.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's like stark contrast to Arthur Fleck, who obviously they've exaggerated this element of him. He's just not funny at all.
No.
It's just to make the character study ever more fucking bleak.
And overt as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest problem. The screenplay is so fucking obvious in everything it wants to do.
Yeah.
There's actually moments in the film, and there's actually moments in Folie, Deux as well, where a character's literally saying, it's just like, this is literally the writer saying to the audience, this is what's happening now.
Yeah, literally.
And you sort of accept that more in like a sort of a big sort of Marvel movie, because they have to have those moments in them, because obviously they're for everyone, and not everyone has the attention span to like pay attention to like, more sort of well disguised exposition. But for a film that again purports to be this like cutting edge sort of study of contemporary society, it doesn't sort of bode well that to have that sort of outward facade, then to go, and now this is happening. Zazie Beetz wasn't real, all that shit.
Yeah, they gave you a nice flashback, didn't they?
Yeah, flashbacks just unnecessary.
And then there's a bit at the end when he's talking to Robert De Niro's character, where he's yelling at him that he's the entire like thematic through line is just yelled out at Robert De Niro. It's like, I can't believe I've been marginalised by a society who like doesn't favour. And it's like, I get it. Like, I can understand that your frustration already. You don't need to, relay it to me in that way. And nor would you in this context. Like, if your mind is fractured, you wouldn't be that concise.
Yeah. So wrapping it all up before the sort of blood-soaked finale.
Which I only remember the game show bit, and then a riot, and then he gets put in prison, and that's it.
Oh yeah, vaguely. I remember the bit with the stairs, and that's when I was like, this is... I also... remember the bit when he dances in that squalid bathroom, and also thinking this is poo-poo. It just felt like Phillips was going like, how can I make this like look, how can this be like more like deep, how can I make this deeper for a dance sequence in? So alright, fuck it, why not, we're trying everything else.
Interpretive dance, there you go.
Post murder.
Bizarre.
To explore his sort of his liberated self. I don't know.
I guess.
Figure that out.
Yeah. It's deep, mate.
It's deep
really
stuff.
Really deep. Well
really,
done.
really deep.
Just thinking about other films that society, maybe thinly veiled attempts at nuance, always comes to mind a film I actually don't mind, V for Vendetta.
Oh yeah.
That's a sort of very obvious. I mean, I know the source material is it doesn't hide the fact that it's pretty anarchic, and I think the source material is actually more anarchic than the film, which which is an interesting take on it, because V's meant to be an anarchist, isn't he? He's meant to be, again, more like a kind of almost Heath Ledger Joker type figure, but in the film he has a real moral agenda and a real like ultra left wing sort of approach to. I mean, obviously that is needed because in the story Britain is sort of enslaved by a sort of far right government. But it's just I think that film is another example of really wearing the themes on its sleeve, but doing a better job of it. I think I quite like that film.
It also has that sort of 2000s sheen to it.
Yeah,
which
definitely
makes it sort of me less critical of it.
Yeah, there's a really good scene in it where Natalie Portman reads some notes from a girl who's been put in prison.
Yeah,
it turns out to be all fabricated.
Yes,
but that only serves to kind of anchor the themes of the film a little bit more. Like, and there's just a really wonderful sequence about a gay woman who is like shunted out of existence by this government, and it's just a nice scene. And yeah, I have fond memories of that film. I actually had a poster for it in first year. I didn't like it that much, but it was like a cool looking poster.
It's interesting when you think about the way in which the sort of this iteration of Joker has always been immortalised by a certain group of people. You could almost say the same for V for Vendetta V.
Mate, the legacy of that film has become The Mask, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And what that represents, although, yeah.
It's anonymous, isn't it?
Yeah. And it got co-opted by that and probably a swathe of other groups.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of people probably misinterpreted the... although, I don't know.
Try to topple Wall Street, it's probably a bit more of a noble cause.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, but they were everywhere for a bit.
I think it's sort of like these kind of that kind of like. I think the Joker's sort of guilty of this as well. I'd say the Joker's probably more sort of troubling. It gives it a bad aura.
Yeah,
even if the sort of intentions are good and all this sort of stuff, it ends up being, there's a sort of, again, that sort of internet sweatiness sort of takes it in.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't agree with some of the things that the people who wear that mask are trying to achieve. It's just, you can't help but be a bit like, oh.
Yeah.
If I saw someone like wearing that somewhere, I'd be like, oh.
Yeah. Strange, slightly dated.
Yeah. At first, I thought probably my first thought. What are you doing?
Yeah.
No, interesting. Yeah, that's a good comparison. I mean, I can't really remember that movie. I mean, at all. I mean, the last time I probably saw that was when I was like a teenager, so I can't really. But I remember that sequence.
Yeah.
I remember Hugo Weaving.
Yes. Good performance by Hugo Weaving, playing someone who is always behind a mask, which I think we find admirable.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of the most recent Batman film, the Robert Pattinson Batman.
Okay.
Sorry, not to keep it too much on comic books, but
no.
The villain in that is like a kind of, basically, he rallies a bunch of like incels in the third act.
Yeah.
And I think how that relates to Joker, I don't really know. I mean, is it anti what the Joker's message is? I mean, or what it ended up doing to a particular contingent of men on the internet?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the Joker did seem to have this broad thematic appeal. And again, we've sort of said that. Broad strokes wise, it's, if you're of that inclination, you would agree with it, right?
Yeah.
But, that... there also seems to be a contingent of men, if you say, that took that reading further. As a way, and I think it's because of that sort of mishandling of mental health and the violence in the film that those elements became.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting when you frame it in the context of that of Matt Reeves' Batman, in the sense that it is Batman just pummeling a fucking incel, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, the third act is that.
Yeah,
he just got all these sort of internet kids to sort of storm a stadium.
Yeah,
and I remember. I just thought about it now. I was just like, well, in stark contrast to Joker, which kind of seemed to. I mean, whether that was the intention of the film or not, but like you say, the handling of the themes made it so.
Yeah.
And then have the Batman kind of jump on the bandwagon of, no, actually, like, this is abhorrent behaviour and you shouldn't be thinking this way, and society doesn't owe you that much. I think like a lot of people maybe misread the sort of themes of the Jokers of being like, oh, maybe I'm like the Joker, or maybe I deserve more, whereas actually they, that isn't the case at all. Like they're already well fed by society, but they don't see it that way. I mean, I'm not saying everyone is well fed by society, but I think a lot of these kind of internet men, we'll call them, maybe have interpreted it in that fashion. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think it's almost about, it's kind of like finding a cause to legitimise their worldview, isn't it? And I think,
yes, yeah.
And I think, again, the broad strokes element of the Joker, it's like, yeah, okay, fine, but for people like that who are desperate to find something to sort of nail their colours to, like, you need that sort of iconography. And I think the clumsy nature of how so many of those themes are handled provided perfect sort of conditions for it to be co-opted by a certain kind of contingent of people. And it's also interesting when you consider how the last Joker, I mean, Heath Ledger's Joker, there was that guy who shot up that cinema, and I think that's why a lot of people some critics were very sort of, they were very critical of that Joker, because for that reason. It was this is like a really dangerous and sort of, this is this isn't the right thing to do. This isn't the man
to idolise.
I
don't think the film frames him in that way, but because he's such a captivating presence in the film, it can you could easily be led down that path.
And I think the willingness in which the sort of society, the society he inhabits, sides with him. Almost sort of, it gives this sort of power fantasy.
That
is, completely at odds with the reality.
Massively in the joke, massively.
People don't necessarily. I don't oppose like mass sort of the movement of the people to sort of challenge things that they think are unfair, but I don't know. In the Joker, it just sort of like felt like sort of window dressing, and all of a sudden it was like one of the central plot points. And I'm like, well, how the fuck's this happened?
Big time. Agreed. And it's sort of, it doesn't inject any sort of two-sided. The idea that people are all the same is sort of, I think, all across that film, all across the first Joker, because, and then that's not true at all. Like, society there's a huge variety of people with different political views and different kind of cultural backgrounds, and that film did, like, if you want to make a film about society, you have to represent society in its true form, or at least in a form, in a kind of measured form, not in a kind of like, we have the mob, and the mob agrees with you, therefore they're all going to do this. And I think, and the sequel does that even worse. Like, it gives off the impression that everyone outside of the story is the same, and there's like it's almost like society is an army. And
just waiting for the right figure to sort of
and then it'll be
them
everyone.
To a new dawn.
And people will either be not interested at all or throwing petrol bombs at courthouses.
It's a sudden jump. Let's talk about Folie Poo.
All right. Yes.
What were your sort of first impressions
leaving the cinema?
So it was a while ago.
No, that's right. I remember it. It was like, for me, because I'd just impossible not to be exposed to the reception of the second one. I know it was predominantly negative, so I was gearing up for something that was going to be like sort of interesting, and like, why are people's reactions to this film so strong? And I came out thinking that was just sort of boring. Like, I don't really. It was trying to say something. It was trying to say, I get the idea and I get the message of the film, maybe flip-flopping on the first film, which was sort of, I can understand why that might be a bit of a welcome change, but for me, I just found it. The musical thing, like, I was not too keen on personally. Although your partner Georgia made a good point about the songs being old songs, I didn't mind that. I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I was just sort of a bit bored, really. I remember thinking, I don't know what to take away from this, because I wasn't that engaged with it. And that was that, really. It was just kind of dull. And there's a huge courthouse scene at the end. It's like the last third of the film. And it goes on and on and on. And it's only disrupted by a big bomb at the end. I like the explosion, actually. Explosion was good.
Good film explosion.
Yes, I put that in my Letterboxd review as well. First impressions, pretty bored for me. What about you? You saw it yesterday, right?
I did, yeah. I paid £19 whole.
19?
Yeah.
Oh
no, maybe £17. I can't remember.
Thanks. Amazon strikes again.
Yeah,
first with Twisters, and now
I know. Yeah,
unbelievable. Yeah.
It's just my inability to plan things properly, and I have to pay the price. So I took the bullet. I actually came out of it thinking I preferred this to the first film.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I know that's going to make me sound incredibly contrarian, and especially considering I just spent the last 40 minutes sort of bashing on the last film. But what I found about it was, I agree with you that it was quite boring.
Yeah.
I think it was thematically as shallow as the previous film.
Yeah.
But what I liked about it was that it seemed, at least on a surface level, that the film was almost undermining a lot of the sort of thematic bullshit that drove the first film.
Yes. Which a lot of people have really reacted negatively to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like, the film, it sort of doesn't really champion Fleck at all. It does a little bit, but towards the end,
not by the end. He's just a man, isn't he?
He completely loses faith in the image that he's cultivated.
Yeah.
I also liked that it was a musical. Okay. And it was interesting to me that, because I quite like a good musical. Okay. All the classic musicals I quite dig. But like, what I thought was interesting was that was one of the main reasons that loads of people didn't like it.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think Todd Phillips thought that because he'd got so many people on side with the first one, he could literally do anything and people would just follow him off a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's funny to me that he would like, right, we're doing a musical, and people are like, really?
Yeah.
And these are the kind of fans that probably, I'm being very fucking general here, but the kind of like comic book fans, they're probably not going to want to see a character they love in a musical. Yeah. They don't have patience for that. That's not their thing.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me that it's the same people that like celebrate the Joker for being different, quote unquote. But then they go and watch a musical version of the Joker, which, at least again on a surface level, superficial level, is arguably far more different than the vast majority of superhero fodder that you're going to see. Yeah. And they fucking hated it.
Oh right.
And I found that quite funny, and that's how it makes you sound like a twat.
I do know. I totally see where you're coming from.
And I don't know. The film was. It felt like it was made by someone that sort of lost a bit of faith in it, and
right, yeah,
and I found that quite interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think I knew about that notion before going in. Like, I really try hard not to expose myself to like the news surrounding a film before going to see it, especially if I know I am going to see it. But it was just impossible not to, and I'd heard that it kind of. I think it was put a little less eloquently by the person I read it from, and they were just like, "It shits all over the original," kind of thing. Yeah, that was the extent of the criticism that I heard, and I thought like, well, that could be an interesting. Okay, how are they going to do that? And like for me, the way they did do that was just boring, and it was just like the court thing and the whole thing with that. There was a moment with the little person in it who. There's something really horrible about that bit that took me out of the themes.
That's Phillips, man.
Yeah,
the bit when he sat on the yellow pages, I thought that is such a naff fucking Phillips joke. Yeah, that's the kind of thing he'd done in Due Date or Hangover.
Totally. And this guy's crying. Yeah, and it was really hard to watch, and it wasn't fun to watch. And he didn't need to be in this film.
No,
he was testifying, and a lot of the film is centered around the actions of the first and the kind of plot of the first film, and I don't think that for me that really didn't work either. I was like, there was nothing sort of propelling it forward other than a love story which isn't nearly as fleshed out as I thought it would be. Also, there's no Folie à Deux in this film. I don't think the idea of Folie à Deux is like shared madness, and it happens quite a lot with serial killer couples, right?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting concept, and I can understand how people that cohabit would eventually, their values and their kind of inclinations would align, and that is like a real phenomenon. They don't explore that at all. Why is it called Folie à Deux?
It really bears. It sort of, it shows the sort of thoughtlessness that permeates throughout both films. Really, I think. Yeah,
and it wasn't about them two either. The film is not about. Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga. Like, it's not about Harley Quinn and the Joker at all. I don't think it. Right. She plays a part in the story, sure, and there's a kind of. She's all
right in it. I mean, she's pretty good.
Yeah. And she's got a good voice. So, I mean, I just think she was utilised in a really strange manner. And the kind of twist they put on her character as well at the end, with regards to who she is, was a bit like afterthoughty. Not as annoying as the twist in the first film, but just a bit like, I don't know. Here you go.
Yeah.
Oh, we've deceived you.
Yeah.
And how he reacts to that, etc. Although that is kind of an interesting catalyst for him realizing that he doesn't want to be the person who he thinks, I guess.
Yeah.
Looks nice. I thought it was handsomely shot.
Both films are.
Yeah. I actually think this one was a lot colder, like the colour palette, anyway.
Yeah.
Because the first one had that weird Instagrammy, greenish, orangey shit going on, which I found a bit off-putting. This doesn't do that. Like, this, to its credit, isn't wearing, visually speaking, is a different film, and I kind of admired that about it. What else did I like about it? I've already mentioned the explosion.
The aforementioned.
Yeah. The majority of it's set in a prison, and so there's no real representation of society in it at all, so you don't really understand what's going on.
I guess they're the dregs, aren't they? They've sort of forgotten.
Yeah.
You know.
Brendan Gleeson's in it.
Yeah, and Steve Coogan.
Yeah. I liked Steve Coogan in it. I thought he was a kind of fine addition. Brendan Gleeson does not belong in this film.
Yeah,
I don't think. I think his performance was good, but I thought it was a bit miscast ultimately.
Yeah, it was strange to me that given that it didn't feel like a role for someone of his stature.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
he could easily land like leads in films. So why is he doing like this bizarre thing in The Joker? I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe the property. Well, it is a property now. I wouldn't call it a franchise quite yet, but maybe his agent was sort of, this is right for you because this is kind of a prestige picture. Or maybe the reaction to the first film prompted a kind of a wider net in terms of casting. So,
yeah, that's probably a fair point.
He got snared by it. I mean, it's been a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks since I've watched it, and the things that are sticking with me are largely a shot of his back with the like horrible shoulder blades right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's just like there's a lot of moments in this film which are just quite nasty.
In a very deliberate sense. I feel like I feel like I'm just shitting on everything to do with these films. Like the camera work, everything, it just feels like very deliberate. There seems to be like a sort of concerted effort to make sure that no stone is left unturned.
Yeah.
Both sort of thematically both narratively and thematically.
Yeah.
Which I just find sort of, it just grates on me a little bit. But I liked it was sort of like, it felt like it was doing away with the sort of self-aggrandizing thing that the first one did.
Yeah.
I really liked, not really liked, but I sort of just found it really interesting that this whole idea about, putting all your sort of faith in this sort of character, it almost sort of like questioned why anyone would.
Right, yeah.
From an audience perspective.
Completely, and
why there was this sort of cultural movement that circles around these certain figures and what they end up sort of becoming, in these sort of small subcultures.
Yeah. So it's subversion on the subversion.
Yeah, it was. and I think a lot of people felt betrayed by that because they, again, on a surface level, sort of felt some sort of connection to the themes of the film, and to have that just sort of collapse in a sort of like pathetic heap, as, Fleck, because essentially it's Fleck sort of wrestling with this idea of, do I sort of surrender to this Joker character, or do I sort of just admit that I'm Arthur Fleck, who's this sort of like just this sort of fucking, just nobody.
Yeah. Would you rather be a nobody if it means you don't have to continue to wear a mask, I suppose? Yeah. That's true. Yeah. And then the scene on the steps at the end, was it a welcome change for you in terms of scenes set on steps in Joker films?
Yeah. I mean, because Harley Quinn she's not interested in him now because he's given that up. He's given, he's just that guy.
Yes, she sort of fallen in love with an idea.
Yeah, exactly. And as so many of these people that have quote unquote mental health issues, apparently according to the world of Todd Phillips, these people are more susceptible to these sort of murderous
Yeah.
sort of countercultural figures. But it's interesting that the film kind of, it does away with that legacy and does away with... I think it does sort of sympathise with him in a way that is perhaps more interesting, I thought, than the first film.
Yeah, is there... so there's a moment in it where he gets in a car to try and escape the courthouse.
Yeah.
And for you, was that the moment where he realised, I don't want to be a part of this anymore?
Yeah, I think it's sort of beforehand when he he comes on, he's got all of his stuff on, and I think everyone's expecting this sort of blowout final send-off performance, and he doesn't give it,
That's it, yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, by that, I mean, again, like, I want to stress that the sort of thematically shallow nature of this film is comparable to the first, and it's not clever in any way, really.
No.
But I just admired that sort of attempt to undermine that, not just through sort of like the sort of story, but also using the musical. It felt like it was an endurance test for the kind of fans that claim they want difference, but really actually don't want difference.
Right, yeah.
They want these characters to be put on pedestals. They want this sort of, it's like, but they don't want those pedestals to be taken away from them.
Right, yeah.
Because they believed in whatever it is that these people purported to have. It almost like made a mockery of them because it was so surface level, Maybe I'm sort of looking into it far too much.
No, I've heard this very thing. Yeah, I think you're right. No, I think that's worthy of... I won't cut it out.
Good. Well, that's really...
Yeah, I think for me, I was a bit... Maybe it was a cinema setting, because I think there's an expectation of wanting to be sort of awe-inspired or entertained, and it was not that for me. It was just really... It's quite a dull experience watching it, so I'm maybe tarred with a brush of just not getting that basic level of entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, don't be wrong, I probably wouldn't watch it again.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to... But I just think it's interesting. I think I said right in the beginning, I think in the intro, that both films are representative of that sort of... there is a genuine shift within sort of the echelons of the industry to try and, like, justify these films on a higher level.
Yeah,
but they simultaneously they can't fully let go of what they perceive to be integral to sort of financial success. You can't really wallow in themes. You can't really make your character really unlikable. You've got to, in the way that sort of Travis Bickle is unlikable. In the way that he is like reprehensible morally, but ultimately human at the same time. But you can't have those moments where you feel betrayed by him, and I don't know. Although there is a betrayal in Folie, but it's sort of it's different, isn't it? It's a sort of different kind of sort of betrayal. I don't know. The film definitely still was kind of in love with itself, and obviously wanted to be a big hit. I thought it was interesting that Todd Phillips really put distance between himself and the film pretty quickly.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
In stark contrast from the last film where you fucking
loved it.
Yeah, you couldn't not see him. He was everywhere. Foot of your bed.
Yeah.
What
are you doing here, Todd?
Yeah.
Have you seen Due Date? It is interesting. I think he maybe was expecting the subversion which he handled in the first film to be replicated by another subversion, and when people reacted negatively to it from both sides of the coin, felt like he sort of retreated because he can't handle criticism. I don't know. I mean, although a lot of his comedies have been pretty poorly received, but I think this was a real swing for him. It cost $200 million, so it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
I don't know where that money went, because I couldn't see a lot of it on screen. Like a lot of sets, maybe, but like. It looked like 100 million, maybe not 200. I thought
the expectation just goes up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess maybe they used a bigger soundstage, or they shot in a different city, or I'm not sure why it cost that much. Lady Gaga probably 20 mil, maybe, and then another 20 for Phoenix. So that's 40 mil out the bag already. Brendan Gleeson, 70 million.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Another thing I remember thinking about. This is a brief aside, but like quite often when you want your characters to be assured in their convictions or whereas at the same time having a kind of moral ambiguity. They smoke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like a really easy way of being like, this guy's not playing by the rules kind of thing. And there's so many smokers in this film. It just annoys me. I just think it's really lazy. But I get, cigarettes are still a big part of society, but like,
they're almost fetishized.
Yeah. It's a tool for the actor it's a thing to use to kind of enhance their performance.
Facilitate their sort of, anti-societal credentials.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just another way of, it's a really, really ham-fisted way of portraying that, I think. Yeah.
And I think there is something in sort of Phillips's storytelling manner that he just can't do subtlety in any way, shape or form.
Yeah.
Everything has to, the cinematography, obviously, filmmaking is largely the practice of that, of obviously conveying things through various, technologies and sort of practices. But, everything felt incredibly deliberate.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
And I just think, whatever. I kind of admired it, but still didn't really enjoy it. It's a really bizarre feeling to have towards a film. I honestly can't think of a film that's made me feel this bizarre mixture of emotions towards it. Yeah, slight admiration, but still sort of puzzlement and mostly sort of.
I think the kind of what you brought up about it is warranted completely, and I can understand how, if your feelings towards the first film are like negative predominantly, then seeing a subversion of that and kind of an actual kind of stepping away from what made the first film so unlikable, then I can understand why that would be appealing.
Yeah.
And if you're impartial to a musical, then maybe you can appreciate the production design and the way that's handled. It can't be easy to shoot, and it can't be easy to perform.
No.
Especially if you're not a singer like Joaquin Phoenix. I think it is admirable in that way. I think for me, musicals for me, and I'm sorry if I've already kind of explained this already in a previous podcast, but there's a suspension of disbelief which needs to be kind of fulfilled, which I find really hard. Like, I find it really hard to accept that the characters which before were talking normally are now singing and dancing. If I go and see a theatrical production with live performance, I can accept it more because I can see this end of the stage, I can see the curtains, I can see the lights, I can see the inner workings a bit more. So I am less absorbed in the narrative for that reason, because of the way I brought up on films. So I can accept it more, but in a film like this where it sort of shifts from a reasonably straightforward narrative, the first film is not a musical as well, like, it's just odd to me. I kind of find it hard to reconcile.
Yeah. I mean, it's clumsily done. I don't really think there's a lot of sort of there's a lot of the musical moments tend to sort of just come out of nowhere and felt sort of clumsily tacked on.
Yeah.
I know where you're coming from with musicals. I quite like them. I do like the ones. I think like the Jacques Demy ones, like. They sort of like use this sort of garish colour palette and sort of like quite sort of jovial sort of tone. But if you actually listen to the lyrics and the sort of interactions, it's actually quite sad.
Right, okay.
So there's almost like a bizarre
something to be mined,
juxtaposition going on, which is the expectation of the musical as this sort of pure form of like sort of escapism is almost being undermined. They're the kind of ones I like.
That's interesting because I do find a lot of musicals, their sheer like kind of wrecking ball of positivity is grating on me as well.
Oh god, yeah.
Like Hannah went to see Wicked and I just knew I wasn't going to like it, even though apparently it's great. I just knew there's something about that sickly sort of.
No, I agree. Wrecking ball of positivity is a brutal. It's like a giant bath bomb.
Yeah, exactly.
Covered in sort of glitter.
It's like
everyone's like, eh!
Yeah.
Fuck
off. Like, I don't know. No. It just really...
It's raining outside and I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, your attempts at making me smile have not worked. I find that, and that's not. I'm not a miserable guy either. Like things do make me smile. I think
you're a very happy man.
I think humanity makes me smile, not singing But there we go.
No, I agree. I'm completely with you. And I even like musicals. Yeah, I don't think I'll be rushing to see Wicked.
No, we're not going to do that. Sorry, just say that now.
No.
Yeah, we'll skip that.
Power to you if you enjoy it, but no, not for us.
No, I think I'd struggled to talk about it for very long
Without being...
Yeah, without just ranting. Like I did
taking
in the
your trousers off and getting angry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, outro?
Outro!
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then.
Indeed. Interesting in the way we talk about the sort of ham-fisted use of catharsis in the film. That was cathartic for me.
Yes, it was.
To sort of lay into it a little bit.
It's funny, like, also, because it's been a while since I saw it, having a discussion about it brought back memories of like more detail about the film that I'd largely forgotten because I've sort of written it off in my mind.
Yeah.
And also hearing your opinion on it was interesting because I really thought you weren't going to like it at all.
Yeah, I fully expected to go in there and really hate it.
Yeah.
And like the first like half an hour, I was like, "This is pants."
Yeah.
You know, for me anyway. But
yeah,
there were elements of it that grew on me in a way that made me think, yeah, I didn't actually mind it, and that's strange to me, given that I wasn't a huge fan of the first one, obviously.
Yeah.
And like I said before, you know, it's a bizarre sensation. This film has given me a bizarre mixture of emotions that.
I think it's admirable that you don't shy away from being open about a sequel because, you know, because obviously your opinions about the first film, they're going to come with you to the second one.
Yeah.
And for you to, regardless of those opinions, sort of see the merit on, you know, in the second one in a way perhaps I didn't. I just think it's interesting, you know.
Oh.
Yeah, well, no. It's December, it's Christmas time. Oh.
Give it to me.
Yeah.
Next week.
Yes. Not Conclave again.
Yeah, there will be some Conclave.
Yeah, I think...
And I'm actually going to be honest, Ben, a lot of this is my fault. we keep doing this.
No, it's okay.
You keep going to see the films. I come home from work and look at it and go, it's too late, I can't go. So it is on me, everyone.
Luckily, I just do enjoy going to the cinema anyway. So even if we never do Conclave, I'm glad I watched it.
I've heard quite good things, and I want to go and see it. So we will try and do that episode, as we will do Megalopolopolis at some point.
Yeah. I think. I briefly want to touch on what Conclave is doing, and I think it would be really interesting to discuss demographics and cinema goers.
Yeah,
because this appeals to a demographic which has been underserved to oblivion since COVID. So it would be interesting to discuss that, but we'll park it for now, I think, because I think Conclave will probably have legs Oscar-wise anyway, so we can talk about it maybe next year.
Yeah, Ralph Fiennes, right?
Yeah. Cinematography, etc. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice.
Instead, Werewolves.
Yes. A title of a movie.
Yeah, with Frank Grillo, who I quite like, actually.
Yeah.
He's sort of like went from being fairly reputable to a lot of bargain bin action films. So
okay. Yeah.
I think this is. I think anyway that's been his trajectory. I'm kind of just guessing, but.
It's a career lull, and
fair play to him, he's still cracking on.
Yeah, no, it might just
still
be
doing the Lord's work.
Yeah,
in Conclave.
Yeah,
it's the unofficial sequel. No, I'm quite looking forward to it. I'm in the mood for a bit of schlock, bit of fun, and I haven't had that sensation in cinema in a while. Obviously, I try and keep away from this sort of stuff before I watch the film, but I've seen a lot of the practical effects.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah.
Very reminiscent of sort of Dog Soldiers, which I know we both.
I will rewatch that film for next week because I love that film.
Exactly, it gives us an opportunity to watch that film and also talk about werewolf films, which I don't think we've done specifically. I think we've touched on obviously American Werewolf and I think Dog Soldiers as well, but. We haven't had the opportunity to sort of really get our teeth into it.
No, I agree. I think it'd be great to talk about American Werewolf in more detail because
you love it. It's one of your all-time faves.
Absolutely love it. It
is a brilliant film.
Yeah, it's great. It's John Landis's best film by a country mile. Won't say any more for now, but I think it's one of those films that is a passer down from generation.
Yeah, it definitely has that too. Yeah, I agree.
And there's a lot to love about the practical effects in it as well, which will link nicely with werewolves.
Seems to be something in that about the sort of starting the episode already. The sort of the werewolf, the sort of idea of the werewolf as a sort of film antagonist. It seems to sort of just invite this kind of innovation as far as sort of practical effects go.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and that seems to be carried on into werewolves.
Werewolves, yes.
With Frank Grillo. So, yeah. Look forward to talk about that. It's out tomorrow, so cool. I will endeavour to try and see it over the weekend, hopefully.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah. That Conclave, that'd be a double bill.
Yeah.
In the meantime, thank you for getting to the end of another episode.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate it. And take it easy.
See you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.